Good morning. Once again, I've been up for 2 hours, a little over actually, and awake longer, always. Very rarely do I jump out of bed as soon as I wake up. Once in a while, but not very often. Usually I lay there hoping to fall back to sleep for a little bit longer, but it doesn't usually happen because then I'm afraid that I'll oversleep and not get up in time for my 4:44 video. Anyway, good morning again. Lots of pondering going on this end this morning as I'm dealing with a subject that is taking me some places where I wasn't at first expecting. The title is 2012, To Be Empowered, Plug the Leaks. And I wrote a blurb over an hour ago, actually. Recognizing our individual and collective power requires knowing how we have been disempowered. For me, two words sum up the ability of the matrix to drain our power: guilt and fear. I don't believe we would even fear if we were not first convinced that we are guilty of something, which always makes us feel less than. That feeling is the root of our fear. When I first wrote that, I was thinking and reflecting on my own life, thinking about and reflecting on my own life in regards to what kept me from doing what I feel and felt that I was here to do. In other words, fulfilling my mission. What kept me from doing that most of my life? And the answer, guilt, is the big word. Not fear so much. Fear too, but guilt first. Guilt first. Because I was trained in fundamentalism, which means there are a set of rules that you must measure up to. And if you don't measure up to them, you're not going to be loved, you're not going to be accepted, you're not going to be validated, you're not going to even be seen in many cases or heard. Because who's going to listen to somebody that's bad or that's guilty? And the big one throughout my life as an adult has been my sexuality. How do I handle my sexuality? How do I handle the thoughts, the lustful thoughts? How do I handle the masturbation? And how do I handle these things? What do I do? Because I was taught guilt. I was taught taboos. And as I've learned more in recent years of the origins of our species, how the gods created us to be disempowered, how our sexuality was to be used only as they, the rulers, prescribed within a certain narrow parameter, carefully defined, and pleasure was not part of it. Procreation only was part of it. Do you see how that's come down to our present day, and especially in the Vatican edicts and Roman Catholicism? It's only there for procreation, not for pleasure. We've been made guilty by Gnosticism and by our religions to receive pleasure. I was, and it has plagued me all of my life. All of my life. I want to feel good, and then when I allow myself to feel good, there's guilt involved that makes the good bad. And that was where I was going to go this morning. That And the whole idea of ego, the same person that I mentioned yesterday, and people say, why are you giving him attention, or her? I don't know whether it's a he or a she. Doesn't matter. It's some troll that's in there trying to prove their particular viewpoint that we're all selfish. And if we're selfish, we're not spiritual. Bullshit. I said it yesterday and I'll say it again today. Taking care of the self is the first priority of every one of us. To be selfishly zealous of our own experience and to validate our own self. What we feel is what we feel. What we choose to experience is what we choose to experience. Now, sometimes we choose poorly, and I'm saying there are repercussions for that, and there ought to be repercussions for that. Ron, are you saying that people should feel guilty when they do stuff that's bad? Yes, when it's really bad. But we have taken guilt, religion has taken guilt to a whole new extreme where you feel bad for feeling good, where no one is injured at all, but you feel bad. I know, because I've been there throughout most of my life. I've been there. But what Spirit has been impressing on me since I wrote that blurb is something totally different. I feel I'm being shown the heart of God. God isn't on a guilt trip, at least not the creator of all that is. There are those that we have called gods in the Old Testament and in our religions that have used guilt and fear to manipulate humanity so that humanity could be kept less than and disempowered. But we're discovering where that is coming from and we have the ability now to plug the leaks. But the intention of our Creator, the ultimate creator even of the gods. Now that's a concept that maybe some of you don't get to yet. But what we have called gods are lesser gods, if you will. They are not actually gods at all in the way we think of God as the creator or the great spirit or the all that is. The all that is exactly that. It's in everything, can't be separated from anything, never was any separation, always unity there, loving the dark and the light equally. Can you believe that? Can you believe that? The God in the Old Testament that said, I create good and I create evil, and they are alike unto me. Can you believe that kind of a God? That all that is God, that loves the shadow as well as the light that casts the shadow. God's purpose in all of this is reconciliation with creation. For God to be recognized as love, because that is what God is. That is what the Creator is. The Creator is very loving in allowing us to have free will and to venture into the far country, as it were, as prodigal sons and daughters. To go into the far country where we could get it wrong. And the loving heart of the Creator is not to punish us. The prodigal son came home, as Jesus told the story, willing to be a servant in his father's house. His father would have none of it. It wasn't about subservience or slavery or bondage. It was about freedom and liberation. And whatever you've done, even if you're one of the elite that has committed atrocities, crimes against humanity that are unspeakable. No, you haven't done it personally. You have just made the way for it to happen by creating conditions in people's lives that they were desperate and then bribing them to do the unthinkable things like Joseph Kony, for example, that we talked about yesterday. And that video has gone viral and it's even in the mainstream media now. And it seems strange they're going to the governments, asking the criminals in government to take care of the criminal that they created over there in Africa. Sort of a joke. But as I was thinking about that, what about the criminals that sit in the ivory towers? Is God's intent for them to be punished? Or is God's intent for them to be reconciled? The ministry of Christ is the ministry of reconciliation. That's the ministry of the Buddha. That's the ministry of all true spirituality. The goal is reconciliation. The goal is to be made right by a process of repentance and forgiveness accepted. It's not to punish. It's never to punish. Punishment, or as it says in the Bible, judgment is God's strange work. It's against God's nature to judge. And yet judgment comes. Why? Does it come from God? No, it comes from the individual judging him or herself. Because they haven't repented. Because they haven't turned around and stopped their dastardly deeds and their wicked ways. They haven't turned from the violence of trying to overrun another person's free will, from trying to control and manipulate and coerce someone else to do your bidding. That's never God. That's never the Creator. The Creator is on a freedom kick to give each one of his children total freedom. But to get them to accept total responsibility for their actions is necessary. It's not God judging us for being bad. It's just simply the law of karma, if you will. We reap what we sow. But ultimately, we've got to get over the artificial guilt for things that bring pleasure. That's the main thing. We're not allowed to feel pleasure. We're not allowed to take care of ourselves, because then we're judged as being not sufficiently spiritual, as with the fellow from the last couple of days or so, who was trying to make me feel guilty because I talk about I and me and my. That's the only thing I'm capable of talking about. And that's an artificial guilt that nobody should ever feel guilty. Ever, 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 for telling their own story as their own story. This is what I thought. This is what I felt. This is what I experienced. Nobody should ever feel guilty for that. Ever. Not ever, ever. That's a false guilt. It has no basis in any truth, in any real spirituality. It is absolutely an invalidation, and it's an unconscionable invalidation of someone else. And anybody that follows a teacher that teaches those things needs to turn and run away from it, because it's false teaching. It's false teaching. There are things that we should feel guilty about. When we've hurt another person or wounded them, we need to take responsibility and be willing to make retribution to the best of our ability, because we have wounded and injured them unnecessarily. And that's a forgivable thing. They're all forgivable. The things even that the Illuminati has done, as atrocious as they are, as atrocious as Joseph Kony, the things that he has done and the things that he has caused others to do, as atrocious as they are, they're all forgivable. From the heart of God, they're all forgivable. Because God just simply wants us to come home, to return to his house of love, to the space of love, to be able to create beauty, to be able to create masterpieces of artistic endeavors in music and in art and in science, and to use our abilities to explore the world and the universes of universes, the entire cosmos, to be able to explore it, to be set free and liberated from our souls. That's the intent of the Father. That's the intent of the Mother. That's the intent of all that is, the creator of all that is, the Great Spirit, the whole Spirit that we call holy. It's holy only when it's whole. If it's separate, it's not holy by being separate. It's only holy by being whole. Wake up. Wake up. We've got to plug the leaks. We've got to stop the guilt that is insane and ridiculous and unfounded, and thereby stop the fear of punishment. Because isn't that what it's all about? Punishment? I don't want punishment. I want reconciliation. Because that's the heart of my Father that's in me. That's the heart of God in me. That's the heart of Christ in me. To be empowered, we must plug the leaks. And to plug the leaks, we have to stop allowing anybody to invalidate us and put us in a box that is smaller than we are intended to live in. We are intended by the Creator to be free, to be love. Thank you. Namaste.